Being a writer who has yet to achieve the level of success as a writer that I wish, I also haven't achieved that level of success as a YouTuber. But you can help me achieve it because I'm going to give this away. Just watch all the way to the end. You can find out how to get it. Or just skip to the end. But you'll find out how to get this. But that's besides the point. The point is, I teach writing. I recently showed my class the documentary The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. That title is quite long and itself has multiple jokes, or at least attempts at jokes.
Talking him out of chumpatizing himself.
I showed that movie in part because it was my birthday and I wanted to do something fun, but also because I wanted something that I could relate back to class. I picked King of Kong because I'm currently teaching students in Pakistan. I'm not in Pakistan, I'm in Southern California, and I'm in my garage, but they're definitely in Pakistan. One of our essays is built around a simple but complicated question. Are names important? The King of Kong brought the question of are names important to the forefront. When I asked the question, what do you think when you hear the name Steve Wiebe? Regular guy, relatable, cries a lot. Those are their responses about him, not me, although they definitely apply to both of us. Cries a lot. When I asked what they thought of when they heard the name Billy Mitchell, gangster, the best, bad guy. None of which apply to me. Cries a lot. Netflix began streaming in 2007. A few years prior to that, for my birthday, a few of my friends gave me 3 months of free Netflix. I still have Netflix. Probably the most expensive gift I've ever been given. Once Netflix shifted to streaming and it became available on my Mac another little while later, I discovered The King of Kong. I watched it over and over. I mean, in part it was because at that time, streaming Netflix was a fairly barren landscape. And I generally still got the best stuff in my mailbox. I also watched it because it was just so very compelling. The King of Kong originally began as a more broadly conceived documentary about the strange subculture of competitive retro gaming. The filmmakers very quickly found 2 key things. Donkey Kong's high score and Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell. Well, actually 3 things, but 2 categories of things. As over 300 hours of film was shot, plenty of other gamers were cut out of the film. Some make minor appearances. However, film is a narrative art form, even documentary film, most of the time. And a certain story emerged that demanded to be told. Alex Gibney has said that he personally narrates his films because all documentary film is authored work. Such is the case of King of Kong, and while the filmmaker's actual voice isn't present, his point of view certainly is. This point of view, this narrative through line, making fun of these guys, but also presenting them with love, is why I watch this film over and over. It's why I showed it to my students all these years later. Prior to my laptop screenings via Netflix, it was a festival darling, premiered January 22nd, 2007 at Slamdance, and then going on to other festivals, and receiving a slew of awards. It's the rare documentary that transcended its genre, and probably in part because it is very much an authored work. In part because the film is truthful, but not entirely accurate. For example, Billy Mitchell and Steve Wiebe apparently had a much friendlier relationship in real life.
Hey, Billy.
There's certain people I don't want to spend too much time with.
And Wiebe actually broke somebody else's score. This guy, forgive me Tim, I don't know how to say your last name, but no one knows how to say my last name either, so I'm with you, brother. Who in 2000 overtook Mitchell's original score from 1982. Fictional or factual, let's take a look at one of the most impactful documentaries of the last 20 years. At least, impactful to me. First, it's a really well-built film. It quickly establishes why people care about retro gaming and the significance of Donkey Kong. It then establishes the historical significance of Billy Mitchell. With that, Billy Steve made up a fake score. I wonder if fake scores will have any future significance. Anyway, Billy Steve got beat by Billy, digitally, not physically. Billy bested him in a classic gunslinger's duel. Again, digitally. Also, Billy Steve Sanders, is a lawyer who seems to have a Jar Jar Binks-like life debt to Billy.
I went in the arcade and sat down with Donkey Kong and I beat him to a pulp.
That brought him to the truth, and from there we worked together.
Mr. called Jar Jar Binks. Mr. Your humble servant.
Is that why Billy is so happy when people say things about him online about alleged fake scores? I'm getting ahead of myself. Billy Steve called Paulina Fay Ray. I should point out that Donkey Kong is not an adaptation of King Kong. Not even the underrated 1970s disaster film version with Jeff Bridges. Shockingly, there were no King Kong games in the 1980s or 1990s, and the first game with the title King Kong didn't come until 2005, adapting Peter Jackson's 3.5-hour film into a video game that, according to various YouTube playthrough videos, is about 4 hours long, give or take. And it comes with the title that's even more of a mouthful than The King of Kong, A Fistful of Subtitles. There were some games in the early 2000s for the Game Boy Advance, based on Kong the Animated Series, but as you can tell by the title, that cartoon and those games weren't king. But I digress, returning to the real King of Kong, Billy Mitchell. There's lots of Billy worship here. It's done in a way that's both tongue-in-cheek and yet actually establishes Billy's significance in the film. It's really wonderfully done. It's on par with a good action comedy or a Marvel movie. It's fun and has real stakes, but isn't self-serious. We also meet Walter Day, the transcendental meditationalist who writes rock operas on his farm.
I tell you, never not to love.
Because I'm the man, you know?
Walter seems to be a sweet and generally sincere man, who's kind of also wrapped up in the cult of Billy Mitchell.
Hi, Billy. Billy's probably the closest person to being a Jedi of any of the players.
Early in the film, he says some of the most telling and significant things in the film about Billy Mitchell. When talking about Billy being the first person to get a perfect score on Pac-Man, he says that it's not just someone got a perfect score on Pac-Man,
But because Billy Mitchell got a perfect Pac-Man score.
Walter Day is the founder of Twin Galaxies. It's the official scorekeeper of retro gaming, which Billy and his acolytes are all part. Here we also get a glimpse of what was clearly wrong with Twin Galaxies at the time. It was an insular institution, built by a sweet weirdo in Walter Day who had a deep affection for superstar Billy Graham. I mean, gaming star Billy Mitchell. They are the establishment. Steve Wiebe, that dude, well, that dude's me. Cries a lot. Steve's story starts with getting laid off. I lost my first good, real producing job the day I got back from my honeymoon. Steve changed careers and went into teaching. Yet another thing I can relate to. Some high school teachers sell meth, some play Donkey Kong.
The answer is no. Next time, apply yourself.
In playing Donkey Kong, Steve just wanted control of something. I felt the same way after having my first daughter. So I started a YouTube channel. He started playing Donkey Kong. He's also hyper emotional.
I've probably seen Steve with tears in his eyes more than any other guy I know.
Again, something I can relate to. Also, no one can say either of our names correctly. Yet another thing I can relate to.
Steve Wiebe is here.
Steve Wiebe is on his second man.
If Steve Wiebe...
Against Steve Wiebe.
Steve Wiebe is a trooper. The Steve Wiebe just scored 985,600 points.
With the key players, like literally players, and the significance of Donkey Kong established. Walter then talks the importance of rules and the challenges of being the referee. Billy, Steve, and Walter Day all go on about rules. It seems the enforcement of these rules was arbitrary and existed to maintain the status and power of the establishment of Twin Galaxies. We then get a growing vertical line, a brilliant visualization, of the rise of competitive gaming and the increase in the scores and therefore the skills of the players. Here I should also address the other character in the movie, the music, which at times can frankly be quite a bit aggressive. With Eye of the Tiger and You're the Best, both being perfect and perhaps a little too on the nose. Overall, the music gives it a lot of energy and life, and really generally does fit the tone of the film. The music helps pluck the strings of nostalgia while establishing that Marvel-like tone. Steve then overtakes Billy's score, and we get the most real human moment in film history.
I will in a second, bud.
What?
I'm gonna get the world record, Dirk. You stop it!
Some of my students laughed out loud at this moment. Steve is now a bit of a celebrity. He's the Donkey Kong champ after all. However,
The worst thing that could happen would be to give somebody the credibility of a score that doesn't deserve it.
Billy instantly questions Steve's legitimacy, in large part because of Roy Schultz,
He's crazy, blah, 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 blah.
a rival to Walter, Billy, in the establishment of Twin Galaxies. Twin Galaxies sends its thugs to Steve's house and open up his board. Although we don't actually get to see this sequence. I wish we did. I could only imagine how amazing that would have been. We just see his wife talking about it. They question a gummy substance on the board.
Chip out of all of these chips in the right spot on the right board. I mean,
I have to say, there's a conspiracy here.
However, it's not really about the board. It's about Roy Schultz.
About me convincing Steve Wiebe not to be a chump, talking him out of chumpatizing himself.
Even if that board is a completely legitimate board, Roy's taint on it is too strong.
So Billy says, go to Fun Spot, even though he doesn't show up.
What I mean is probably a good idea, like if I say hi to Todd.
Here the film really leans into both the importance of retro gaming and totally makes fun of the people who find it so important and dedicate so much of their lives to it. Steve competes in person. Billy sends a tape. I wonder if Billy in these tapes is gonna matter later in, not this film, but just like in life.
He's a very devious person. He works things out to his ends.
We're really seeing a great game here.
Steve begins winning the respect of everyone, except Billy. We quickly establish the importance of kill screens.
The kill screen kicked in.
In short, you've played the game so much that the game itself actually dies. Like if this shadow box were to fall off the wall and just shatter because you've looked at its beauty for so long and its majesty. Not technically accurate, but it gets the spirit of what a kill screen is. Steve gets the first public kill screen on Donkey Kong and the highest ever public score. But of course, Billy's tape shows up and sets a new record.
Okay, here we are. We got cameras on the screen, cameras on the crowd. No one's gonna miss this moment.
We have every eye in the crowd focused right on your screen.
Oh, and look at that. And with the bonus, we have the first million-point game of Donkey Kong.
It's clear and it's dirty what he did. There's an immediate question of the tape's legitimacy. But then Walter calls Billy and it's instantly fine.
Robert was noting the tape jumped from score to score. How did that happen?
Walter actually asks Billy the score, as he can't read it on the screen. Oh, the glory of analog media. And the unnecessary reality that I'm recording myself in 4K right now. Suffering yet another defeat in life, Steve and I both cry. We then meet the people of Guinness, who, without any kind of question, just accept Twin Galaxies and Billy and all those people as the authority on retro gaming scores.
It's become very complicated. So to have someone like Walter and his team who just know everything there is to know about computer games was for us a godsend.
We then head to Florida for the Guinness World Record Tournament. Here we get Steve not performing so great. And Steve grows in his frustration as his constant effort results in nothing changing. He can't seem to prove his score to Twin Galaxies and his worth to himself.
I guess it's not even about Donkey Kong anymore.
And Billy just has to show up because he actually lives there. But of course, the dude doesn't come.
Billy's not here.
I told him last night that he had to come.
We get that super on-the-nose use of Eye of the Tiger, but again, it fits. The next song, Leonard Cohen's Everybody Knows, is an absolute home run of a perfect song for this film. Should use a video game analogy instead of a baseball one, but it fits really well. It's 1,000,000 points in public and not set in on videotape. It's a really good song and it's used really well here.
If you don't play when you have to play, if you don't play when the pressure's on, you're really not good enough.
Everybody knows the deal is rotten.
Steve as a man is the soul of this movie, and you can feel it through his piano music. Walter and Billy Steve both finally pronounced Steve's name correctly.
Was it Wiebe or Wiebe?
Wiebe. That's all right. Sorry.
Steve Wiebe. Could you come up here? Is it Steve Wiebe?
Yeah, Wiebe.
All right.
They acknowledge him as a competitor, but not his record. Walter even sent a letter of apology.
After soul searching, we at Twin Galaxies wish to apologize to you for such inconsiderate treatment.
Actually, an email, but Steve was kind enough to print it out. But again, no record. As Dante said in Clerks,
what did you like better, Jedi or The Empire Strikes Back?
Empire. But it ends on such a down note. I mean, that's what life is, a series of down endings.
Life is just that, a series of down endings. In this film, it has a down ending until the credits start to roll and you see that Steve breaks the new record and gets the high score back. Steve breaks 1 million to set a new Donkey Kong record. In real life, Billy then overtook him again, but there's more to that story. Director Seth Gordon quickly moved on to films that are completely fictional with 4 Christmases in 2008. He went on to direct some of the most iconic TV comedies of the last 20 years with Parks and Rec, Modern Family, Community, The Office, all leaning into that documentary style before directing more films, including Horrible Bosses, among others. His more recent work, which includes The Night Agent on Netflix, seems to shift away from comedy to more serious stories. And I haven't even mentioned his very extensive producing work, which includes Pixels, which certainly takes some inspiration from King of Kong. A story that was much better when it was an episode of Futurama, but that's besides the point.
People of Earth, I am Lur of the planet Nintendo 64.
Producer Ed Cunningham Jr. stayed focused on documentaries, working with Gordon on Undefeated and Breaking In. He most recently produced By Rook or Left Hook, the story of chess boxing, which is exactly what it sounds like, for which I was actually interviewed. Yep, that's me being interviewed for a documentary about chess boxing at the Hive Gallery in downtown LA, where I used to have an art gallery space to promote my business/comic collage artwork. My former business partner and good friend, Andrew McGregor, who actually just published a book, so you should check that out. I'll have the link in the description. Andrew was kind of, and still is, I think, the US chess boxing guru, and I personally hosted a chess boxing event as part of my film festival with Andrew. And I was even the timekeeper at a chess boxing event at Andrew's birthday. I, like so many gamers in the King of Kong, was cut out of By Hook or Left Rook. I was cut out of By Rook or Left Hook. By Left Hook or Rook? I was cut out of the chess boxing documentary. And Andrew's barely in it. The full title is By Rook or Left Hook, the story of chess boxing, which follows the King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, subtitle formula, as well as the formula of bitter rivals, which is why Andrew was minimized and me talking about Andrew got completely cut. But what about the guys in front of the camera? Steve went on to become the regular guy of the competitive gaming world, and a crop of younger gamers came along and overtook his scores. Billy Mitchell, that's a whole nother ball of alleged emulation. Walter Day and Billy Mitchell actually owned Twin Galaxies, at least for a period of time. Regardless of the ownership, they had control and sold it eventually. They sold it to Jace Hall, a successful video game and media producer. The new Twin Galaxies had to wade through the muddy waters of numerous, very likely fraudulent, frankly, maybe even just made up scores. Famous among them was a disproven and actually unachievable score on the Atari game Dragster. With the new regime at Twin Galaxies, the forums can be used to protest suspicious scores. People did that with the aforementioned Dragster score and Billy Mitchell's Donkey Kong scores. They alleged that he used some version of emulation to fake his scores. I'm not qualified to speak to it, but it seems like something was going on. The point is, the establishment of the old Twin Galaxies had too much control, and it seems they wanted to maintain their positions of power, prestige, as much as there was to be had in the insular world of retro gaming. This brings us back to my students' papers and the idea of names, and the importance of names, and specifically, the idea of name as reputation. The filmmaker saw a clear good guy and a clear bad guy, and it seems the two accepted their roles. Billy Mitchell seems to revel in it. He really seemed to love being seen as a mastermind.
Not even Helen of Troy had that much attention.
Want to do another take on that, Billy? No? You good? You sure? Okay, moving on.
Okay, go ahead.
He loved being seen as a supervillain, Dr. Doom, or a Bond villain, secretly pulling the strings unseen on the other side of a cell phone, until he reveals himself and his master plan in the end. However, he's a bit more Dr. Evil than Dr. Doom.
It's annoying when somebody's ahead of you. When you're not the lead dog, the view doesn't change.
He thought he'd come off as the bad guy. He just comes off as a bad guy. Based on his alleged cheating, it seems he was willing to trade his personal integrity for his status in the retro gaming world. Ironically, his name once meant the best gamer, the gangster of the gaming world. It seems his name is now associated with cheating and desperation to maintain an image. I'm sure Billy isn't as bad as he comes off in the film, and perhaps Steve isn't as noble. However, there seems to be a fundamental truth in the depictions of both men. Billy fought and continued to fight to maintain that status, but it seemed the truth prevailed. And it doesn't hurt to have a Chewbacca at your side who owes you a life debt and happens to be a lawyer to file lawsuits for you. Possibly. I'm speculating there.
He's proven himself not just as a Donkey Kong player, but really as a person of somebody who really desires to do the right thing.
I'm not familiar enough with the situation.
That's right. I've decided to elevate Billy Steve from Jar Jar to Chewie. Because Billy Steve believed in Steve.
Steve Wiebe is who I wanted to be when I grew up playing Donkey Kong. He's quite the player.
Billy's legacy, as depicted in the film, not even counting future alleged emulation and possible cheating, is one of sleight of hand and deception. And if the allegations of the last few years are accurate, it's a legacy of outright cheating. While Steve Wiebe remains the everyman of retro gaming. If you want this guy, be sure you subscribe to the channel, hit like, and comment on this video. Once I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to give it away. That's it. I am 400 away as I record this video. So thanks for your support. Be sure to like this video, comment on it, and you might get a shadow box from Archrovision 3D. I've recorded so many versions of this that I'm definitely not going to re-record it. This is the hardest part because I didn't script it. Josiah's not a good improviser, I guess. Bye.